Does anyone else think it's weird that there's two Jakes now? And the fact that they got rid of a bunch of the old commercial? Is it cause
She sounds hideous.
Well, she's a guy, so...
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, on with the intro. There's been something so fascinating about franchises that stand the test of time, but only to come back and not be so highly regarded as before. This is usually due to heightened expectation, but in recent months, I've started to notice a decline in expectation. We see a lot more apprehension, because we've had movies like the Jurassic Parks and the Indiana Jones and the controversial Star Wars trilogy, but there's also been films like the new Blade Runner that have lived up to and even stand apart from the original. Continuing a story that is complete on its own should take a new direction. Some sequels continue a story because they are planned, but others have to either rehash or imitate the original in such a way that it becomes dependent on the source. Sequels need to stand on their own, even if they continue themes and or stories. With that said, there is a new Bill and Ted movie coming out.
Bill and Ted, what have you got to say for yourselves?
Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes.
Ted! It's the Grim Reaper, dude!
As a fan of the original, I am excited to see if it does well, or it's exactly what I'm fearing. The original Bill and Ted films are kind of hit or miss, but they're fucking classics. They're not high intelligent art, it's just a lot of fun. So will this one be the same? I don't know. So let's look at the elements of a few other long-awaited sequels and see how they worked and didn't work, and how this might apply to Bill and Ted. And no, I'm not just going to shit on the bad sequels for the sake of being pessimistic, or praising the good ones for the sake of being optimistic. This is more of just a general discussion on sequels that were released later. And to start us off, this movie came out 19 years after the third, and they're still not done. As with many of these sequels, it's far too easy to point out the flaws like the fridge scene and the part with yeah. But the reason I'd say this is an awful sequel is A, it doesn't stand up to what the originals were, and B, doesn't stand on its own. From the first scene, it's very apparent this isn't going to be the same thing. With this goofy intro in. Okay, never mind. But this character introduction looks so bland. The actors look like they're made out of wax. Remember the grit of the original? The fucking Lego game looks more rugged than this.
Huh?
A lot of people have a problem with it being aliens, but we've had the Ark and magic incantations. And this. So I think the problem isn't with the concepts, its faults are in the presentation. Even without comparing to the first three, it's still not good. The development of the characters is bad, the action is kind of fun, which I appreciate, but it's still shit like this. You ever noticed in a film series, it's usually the third one that sucks? Not the case with this, luckily, but it is, however, with...
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
The Godfather Part III.
16 years after some of the greatest films with a concluded story, we got this movie.
I want you to know that I always loved you, Michael.
I consider this movie not good.
Maybe one day, he will make all of you popular.
It's true. I appreciate that a lot of people like this movie, and that's fine. But for me, it was unnecessary and very boring. Let me just go ahead and address my biggest issue as a film goer. I really struggle with slower paced dramas. Although I love the first two Godfathers, I had to watch them twice to fully enjoy them. Same thing with The Irishman. So to watch The Godfather Part 3 3 times for this video and not get that much out of it, one has to wonder, what went wrong? One of the first things it's missing a lot of is the lighting. The first two movies had perfectly presented openings, but in this one it's also bright. There really wasn't anything I liked about this movie. I guess I could say I enjoyed the failed hit scene, and the helicopter part was kind of cool, but I had no investment in any of the characters, so I didn't get any emotion from it. Also, the acting seems so much more careless. Just compared to the original, the intensity is so much less, which is crucial to this kind of story. The sudden spikes of action don't mean shit without properly done tension. This scene at the end of the first one,
only don't tell me you're innocent, because it insults my intelligence.
will be infinitely more intense than the helicopter scene. Also, this woman.
Dad?
Holy fuck is she bad. How did you get in the— oh wait. This story is about Michael Corleone wanting to legitimize, which is really dumb, because it was perfect how fucked up he became by the end of part 2. He was so delusional by the end, which is perfectly demonstrated in this flashback that shows him before he went to war. This movie is completely reliant on the originals, and it misses the amazing story of this character's struggle with who he's trying to become and what his family wants. This is such a bad sequel, because on its own it's bland and boring, but it also does nothing for the story. If you're gonna do a story that's so much later in the timeline anyway, why have it even about the original characters?
That's right, man. I got in.
Tron Legacy is sick as fuck. I know, and again, it's easy to make fun of stuff like, but the soundtrack and the set design, not to mention it stands on its own, and in fact is very different from the original. First of all, I love the original, but only because I'm a nerd. There's a lot to appreciate about it, but it's hard to take it seriously. Partly because it looks really silly, and because of that, I feel like this one is much more tonally effective. Although I'd say the characters aren't as well developed and demon face, it's still very entertaining. So is the original, but for different reasons. Also, the soundtrack, very cool. This film is so different from the original. It feels more like a love letter to its legacy.
I fight for the users.
I really don't have that much to say about it. The shots are cool, the characters' motivations make sense, and when it does call back to the original, it's with a purpose. For what it is and how it compares to the original, respect. It's not like a masterpiece, but it's cool. Although, speaking of masterpieces,
Your story isn't over yet. There's still a page left.
the reason Blade Runner 2049 works as well as it does is because it has a purpose beyond just being a sequel. Although it has themes from the first and continues the universe's story, its own story is independent. Not to mention the overall presentation is so masterful and meaningful in its approach. My overall favorite thing is the look of the film. Great color palette, very nice cinematography, the effects are great, it's just straight up beautiful to look at. This is probably my personal favorite long-awaited sequel, because it's so separate yet so respectful to the original. This is the exact way to do it, because you understand the importance of the story by just watching this story. I'm not going to spend really that much time on this one either, because I really don't have that many complaints. And it's important that I brought up the presentation because that is the first thing I think about rather than it being a sequel. It's just very awesome. If you haven't seen it for some reason, get on that. As we can see, sequels are not a guaranteed success, because at the end of the day, the quality is not dependent on the original anyway. You need new ideas and something that will complement the original, but not be relying on the concept alone. But one film in particular is very similar to the concept and situation of the upcoming Bill and Ted sequel, and I wouldn't have watched it unless I was making this video. Take a deep breath.
It's weird timing, but I gotta take this. It's my dead dad.
She's got me on hold.
I remember nearly crying after watching the trailer for this movie. You can tell from my voice I'm not happy talking about this at all. The first one is also bad, but in like a forgivable way, because it feels more like a let's try to make this funny approach. But in this one, it's just let's be gross and offensive for the sake of being offensive. I couldn't even ironically enjoy this movie, and that is saying something. Now, the buddy comedy concept from Bill and Ted is very similar, but also is them being older. I'm sure I'm not the only person that has seen this film as a warning sign for Face the Music, but I think there is a crucial difference. Bill and Ted are just two stupid friends that want to pass history so they can bro down. It's just absurd rather than gross. And that's where I think we can have a little more hope when compared to this movie. Because there's a lot of humor in the original Bill and Ted that's a little bit more of them just being dumb and reacting. The more subtle humor is kind of the parts that make it so funny. But the best parts of the original Dumb and Dumber are them just being really gross or kind of offensive. Although there are many more things I could say about this film, I don't want to talk about it. Honestly, it just makes me sad. 29 years later, this movie is finally coming out. Should we be scared? Well, no, it's a Bill and Ted sequel. It's not that incredible other than the fact that it's hilarious it's even happening. But it will be very interesting to see how it does compare to the original. I mean, we got Keanu and, Bill. Movies are an industry, so of course these long-awaited sequels are gonna be made for beloved franchises. Speaking of Keanu, we even have another Matrix movie coming out, and Indiana Jones 5 as previously mentioned, and the fucking Avatar movies. But Bill and Ted? That's kind of weird. Like I said, they're not exactly legendary. I mean, I hope every movie that comes out ever is good, but I'm pretty confident this movie's gonna be bad. Because either they try telling a unique story that could be good or bad, or they just try rehashing the originals, which will definitely be bad. I'm not even sure what original story you could tell. I hope they do, and I hope that it's funny. Overall, I'm very excited because I will find it entertaining regardless of quality. I guess at the end of the day, it really comes down to who's making it. Actually, let's see here. Oh god, fuck no, Red with the old people and Jim Carrey. No, home fries.
Sally, I love you.
Okay.
To be the father, to be.
Home fries.
God damn it.